Welcome and good morning. I'm very happy to welcome you to today's webinar organized by smartEn on our recommendation for the electricity market design improvement. I am Michael Villa and I am the Executive Director of smartEn. In the next slide, a very brief overview of smartEn. smartEn is a European business organization gathering 80 companies that are actually enabling consumers of different types to become active and flexible in their interaction with the energy system. Today's webinar, as you can see from the agenda in the next slide, is really aiming to introduce you to our policy recommendation on the revision of the electricity market design. We developed that last year together with the support of the independent consultants from Afry, and they are already available on our website from December, and this occasion is to publicly present them to you. We are going to have indeed 3 steps in today's webinar. The first one is an introduction by the European Commission. Then I will take over again to present you our policy recommendation. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with key senior business representatives that have a major role in smartEn to indeed deep dive into some of our recommendations. Some house rules before starting. The webinar is going to be recorded and you are gonna find the video recording on our website and the different social media channels. We would like to have, to a certain extent, an interaction with the audience. So indeed you can submit your questions in writing in the chat during, in particular, the panel debate. And then we will invite you to reply to a poll at the very end of our webinar by using Slido with a specific code that we will remind you when is the moment. So let's start, and I'm very happy to give the floor to Sabine, which actually is substituting Katarina that was supposed to be here, but then I understand that because of personal reasons had to fly today to Finland. Thanks for Sabine for being here, and we would be really interested to know from you indeed the reflection of the European Commission on the electricity market design revision, why and what for, in particular for demand side flexibility. Sabine, you have the floor.
Yes, hello. Hi, thanks, Michael. I hope you hear me well. Yeah, can you confirm? Okay, great. So thanks a lot for your introduction and your kind words, and thanks for organizing the seminar on this very interesting topic and for inviting us and allow us to say a few words on behalf of DG Energy on the possible revision of the market design. Well, as we are all aware, the energy sector, in particular also the electricity sector, is under a lot of pressure today with the very high electricity prices we are seeing in the market. And this crisis had, of course, led to a questioning of the rules that currently govern the electricity market in Europe. But I think also in this crisis, we should not forget, like over the last years, that the current market design has brought a lot of benefits to citizens and consumers over the last years in terms of security of supply, competitiveness of the sector, and also efficiency gains and affordability of electricity. So having said that, of course, in the last year, we have also seen limitations in the current electricity market designs and the high gas prices, which had a devastating effect, which was passed on to the power markets with severe impacts on industry and on consumers, individual consumers and households. So in the first step to address this crisis, last year in September, as most of you, I guess, will be aware, the Council adopted an emergency regulation with emergency measures. And this was to tackle, like, rather immediately the direct negative effects that the high energy prices have on consumers, industry, as well, of course, as individual citizens and households. But beyond these temporary measures, the Commission has started to prepare a longer term and more structural reform. And this is what I think we are discussing here today. And I think a lot also smartEn for their contribution and their reflections they're having this on this reform. Of course, we also depend and are very interested in the views of stakeholders on how we can improve the market design that we currently have. So what do we see? What would be the overall aim of such a reform? So the overall aim, as we see it, is to mitigate the effect that high gas prices have on the power prices. So this means we would aim at decoupling consumers' bills as much as possible from the price of the marginal technology. So the marginal technology, which today very often still are gas-fired power plants. And at the same time, or linked to this, we want to bring the benefits of lower cost renewables, which have lower operational cost, to consumers in a lasting way. So all this should preserve affordability of electricity while, of course, at the same time preserving security of supply and further supporting the decarbonization objectives that the EU has set itself. And we think that the faster deployment of renewables constitutes the most sustainable way, in fact, to addressing the current energy crisis and to structurally reducing the demand for fossil fuels in electricity generation. So with this overall aim, let me become a bit more specific. So we have a clear set of objectives that we would like to pursue with the reform. So the first is, as I think I already mentioned a bit, is passing the benefits of clean and affordable power production to consumers, while at the same time improving investment certainty also in the clean and affordable power production, of course. A second very important step as well linked to this is optimizing the electricity system for higher shares of renewable energy, because of course higher shares of renewable energy will change a bit how the system functions. And thirdly, and as importantly as the first two, is catering for the changing need of consumers while enhancing consumer protection. So what are the kind of measures or provisions we could have in mind here? So we are interested in examining the contribution that long-term power purchase agreements, more efficient forward markets, and contracts for differences can make to the electricity system of today. And also, the reform should look at possible ways to improve incentives for flexibility, including, and I think this is also a special focus we're having today, including improving incentives for demand-side flexibility, but also improving investment incentives in grids and also incentives for investments in adequate generation capacity. Finally, the reform should cover options to better protect consumers from price volatility and to empower them also. This we already tried with the clean energy package, but we would like to further strengthen that and to empower them to be able to participate more actively in the markets. So coming back a bit to demand-side flexibility, which is a bit the special focus of today. Of course, enhancing flexibility through demand-side flexibility, including demand response, energy storage, and other flexibility solutions is the key, we think, to efficiently integrate a high share of renewables. So it's key to improve the flexibility of the system, to be able to integrate the intermittent renewables, but it's also important to reduce gas consumption, because a lot of the flexibility which we currently have today, it's provided in fact from gas-fired power plants. So we think that enhancing other sources of flexibility is indeed key. As a lot, I think, of you will be aware, the Commission, together with Acer, has started the work on new rules or a new network code to further support the development of demand-side flexibility and to remove regulatory barriers that still exist. So there were framework guidelines from Acer published last year in December, where stakeholders also could make contributions during summer. There had been a consultation, and on this basis, we continue the process of drafting a network code to support the development of demand-side flexibility. But beyond this works on the network code, we also in the context of the upcoming reform, we are reflecting on measures to further enhance flexibility and in particular also demand response. So it will be some of the topics we are also looking at, but it should be considered like complementary to the network code. So demand response storage and other sources of flexibility should be able to compete effectively, we think, in the electricity markets in order to fulfill their role to support the integration of reliable renewables and to progressively reduce the role of natural gas in the short-term market to provide this flexibility which we need. So What will be the next steps for this potential reform? The Commission, and I think that's probably something a lot of you will be interested in, the Commission will launch a public consultation and asking for detailed stakeholder feedback on various policy options that we will present in this public consultation. So some of these questions will specifically target demand-side flexibility. As regards the timing of this consultation, we expect it to be launched soon. So this, I think, is for the moment all I can say on that. And of course, we're very much interested in hearing stakeholders' views. This can only help the quality and will support the quality of any proposal from the Commission. So I invite all of you to contribute to this public consultation. The Commission still aims to present a legislative proposal, which will be accompanied by a staff working document assessing the impact of the proposal, to present such a legislative proposal in the first quarter of this year, which would mean March. So you see, we have quite an ambitious timeline, but yeah, that's the way it is for the moment. I will stop here. Thank you very much, and looking very much forward to the debate. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sabine, for this introduction of the different perspective that the Commission is looking at with regard to the revision of the electricity market design. It's very important that you mentioned the network code, but also the importance to complement that with other measures, looking at the particular the demand side and the activation of their flexibility through the electricity market design. Limiting the activation to a very technical network code is what we would encourage to explore. So that's a very important piece of legislation, but there is much to do there. And that's why, indeed, we developed in this position paper, and that's where I would like, indeed, to attract your attention for the next meetings. So, for the next minutes, if you see in the next slide, you will understand the where our reflection have been contextualized. So, first of all, we take stock on the needs of having this electricity market design, which is increasing the resilience of the energy system. So it's not just the security of supply following indeed the gas disruption, but broader objectives. The second objective that also Sabine was saying is to ensure affordability of energy for all consumers, from households to energy intensive industries, and also ensure that there are the correct investment signals, both short-term and long-term, for all clean compatible energy solutions, including from the demand side. However, we see also some challenges. The first challenge is that with the increase in deployment of electrical loads and distributed generations at the grid edge, low voltage energy system will be very much put under constraint. And it is a challenge that should be addressed in a very smart way. Second challenge that needs to be faced is that the increase in variability in the renewable generation will increase the system flexibility needs. So this is a challenge, and the management of this new increase in variability needs to be indeed faced in an efficient way. And the third challenge that we see is that because of these evolutions towards digitalization, decentralization of the energy systems, we need to have, there will be disruptions in the investment signals, in the commercial developments, and we need to make sure that the efficient and cost-effective resources to enable the achievement of climate neutrality will be actually receiving the incentives to support that 2050 objectives. The risks that we say is that there will be an electricity market design that will be too much, once again, focused on generation, on the supply side. It's very important to keep pushing for a more renewable-based energy system. So it's very important to keep working on PPA, CFD schemes. But if we are missing the demand side, then we are really creating, we are really missing a very important point to create indeed a very efficient transitions towards climate neutrality. And if we are only pushing for a very centralized utility scale set of renewable in the systems, well, we are keeping a very centralized energy systems. And so this is going to be totally incoherent with what the recent evolutions towards a clean energy package push towards a decentralized local energy systems. And if we are also keeping that kind of approach, we will create a very costly clean energy transition. We might create stranded assets or indeed unnecessary investments that could be actually avoided if, and here is the opportunity indeed, if we have consumer actually being able to activate their flexibility and actively contribute. This is going to be a benefit for consumers themselves, but also for the systems to become much more efficient. So this is to contextualize indeed our reflections that led to the position paper that, as you can see in the next slide, is already available on our website, and indeed is outlining 7 recommendations. So I will present them, and then I will have a debate with during the panel debate with some senior representative from smartEn. So the first recommendation in the next slide is to actually implement and not question the current provision in the electricity market design. There are already very important rules to open all electricity markets and capacity remuneration mechanisms to demand-side resources to ensure that system operators are procuring flexibility from the demand side, that there are the possibility for consumers to receive dynamic price signals. In the emergency situation, some of these provisions, in particular the latter, have been questions. We saw a revival of regulated tariffs. Well, we believe that this is not the way to go, and we actually encourage the Commission to support more member states because there is at the moment a very timid implementation of this provision. Second recommendation in the next slide is actually to introduce a target to activate demand-side flexibility. This is very important to actually measure progress, to actually track progress, to quantify the activation of the flexibility from the demand side. The emergency measures introduced last summer on the 5% reduction in consumption in peak times, it's a very good opportunity, but this is only one type of target formulation to actually achieve demand-side flexibility. In Pennsylvania, in the US, there are already some targets to indeed reduce peak demand, and also other schemes could be indeed to have a target related to the curtailment of renewable energy. But this is very important to indeed set a clear target to actually quantify and track progress, and also stimulate the implementation of the different measures supporting the activation of demand-side flexibility. Third recommendation in the next slide is to support the consumers' empowerment. This is extremely good opportunity, the electricity market design revision, to set in European law a clear definition about demand-side flexibility. At the moment, we are just looking very sectorally at demand response, energy storage, or variable renewable generation. But if we put ourselves in a coherent perspective to the smart energy system integration strategy, the different decentralized energy resources will enable consumers to become flexible. And this needs to be put and clearly defined in European legislation, because otherwise we are very, indeed, sectorial approaches. We also need to put ourselves in a future context where consumers will be subject to a multitude of signals, price signals, incentives. At the moment, if a consumer is lucky, is just receiving one price signals or one incentive from an aggregator. But in the future, the consumer should be ideally subject to a multitude of these signals. And we need to avoid a cannibalization, and then automation will help the consumers to adapt. And this is going to be an extremely important principle to avoid a confusing cannibalization of different signals that will not enable consumers to actually interact with the energy systems. And to do that, we need to avoid to consider smart meters as the only metering device. We need to treat equally smart meter and sub-metering system. This is going to be extremely important to allow aggregator and suppliers to actually calculate the baseline of consumers, and then to make the necessary ex post verification to actually calculate the activation of demand-side flexibility. The methodology that they would identify could be certified by the NRA and eventually audited by third parties. This approach will be extremely important to also fasten the activation of demand-side flexibility, also in countries where indeed smart meters are not deployed at the moment. And then we need to accelerate the deployment of harmonized products, in particular for sister services. And for that, indeed, we really encouraged to establish a flexibility register, which will be based on the reciprocity principles, meaning that if a resource is registered in one country, will be automatically registered also throughout the other member states to really enable the cross-border participation of the demand-side resources. A fourth set of recommendations in our, as you can see in the next slide, is to maximize district self-balancing or local self-optimization of the use of the distributed energy resources that are in particular below the substation level. This is going to be extremely important because of the challenge that I was mentioning at the very starting point of my presentation. This will indeed reduce the stress, in particular to distribution system operators. But we need to make sure that these decentralized energy resources are also able to react and participate to a multitude of markets to enable indeed a stacking of values. This is a very important foundation of any kind of solid business model for demand-side flexibility. And this is not coherent with initiatives that are allowing DSO to have a direct load control of some resources. And I'm making this specific reference because of the current public consultation that is taking place now in Germany, looking specifically at this option that should be avoided. We need, however, indeed, to ensure that there is a deployment of decentralized energy resources that are connected with the grid. But there are different types of models for local network access, firm and non-firm capacity. In particular, the non-firm capacity and or an hybrid formation of these models is very interesting. The Netherlands is already experiencing these projects. In Amsterdam, there is a very important project on non-firm capacity with CPO and DSO to deploy electric vehicles charging points that will indeed enable anyway the interaction with the system without stressing and causing too many grid reinforcement. And then in order to enable a full optimized use of local distributed energy resources, we need to have full data transparency on network congestions. A fifth set of recommendation in the next slide is focused on electricity markets. We need to make sure that markets are open to demand-side resources. This is nothing new to compare to what is already foreseen by the electricity market design. And in particular, with regard to short-term markets, we need to keep the existing marginal energy price formation and not to question that. We need also to enhance the time granularity of electricity markets by having shorter settlement intervals and later gate closer. There is already experience in that direction in Australia with a 5 minutes settlement intervals, and this will be very much interested for DR operators. And then we also believe on the possibility to introduce scarcity pricing, so another, in particular to balancing prices, to indeed reflect scarcity in the systems and then allow a subsequent adaptation of consumption. In the next slide, you will see that, yes, we believe in the importance of electricity markets, but also we believe that capacity remuneration mechanism should be an opportunity to incentivize demand-side resources, in particular with a long-term horizon. So it's extremely important to make a capacity remuneration mechanism open to demand-side resources. Once again, this is nothing new to what is already foreseen by the electricity market design, but an additional improvement is to actually ensure that through the derating factors that should be fully valuing decentralized energy resources. And also we believe that requiring that there is full transparency on demand evaluation in any kind of resource adequacy assessment will also very much help tackling the role of demand-side resources in this capacity remuneration mechanism. We also believe in the opportunity to introduce some complementary types of arrangement to the capacity mechanism, like critical peak pricing or reliability options that are indeed forward hedging products to actually hedge consumers to extreme and persistent high energy prices. So this is something that we also encourage to investigate. And then I will conclude with the next slide, which is our last recommendation to actually combine any kind of renewable support schemes to an actual activation of the demand side, because we see that CFD, PPA might lead to overinvestment in generation assets that might create artificially negative prices, which will be then very much detrimental to demand-side resources. So how to make sure that this variable renewable generation is accompanied by a flexible consumption, guarantees of origins 24/7. This is the solution that we encourage to actually introduce to enable a procurement of this flexible resource, this flexible demand in combination with the renewables schemes. So the next slides really summarize our set of 7 recommendations. There is a very solid foundation based on they keep the existing electricity market valid and implement that. Add on that a target, not limited to the emergency situation, and then complement that with additional provisions to the current framework. So this is, in a nutshell, our set of recommendations, and I will very much encourage you to have a look at our position paper, as I said, available on our website, developed with the broad smartEn membership and also with the support of the independent consultants from Afry. Now, as foreseen by the agenda, and we are actually respecting the timeline, I'm very much looking forward to a panel discussion with some senior representative from smartEn and our Stefan Döring, our chair from TICO, Dirk Kaisers from Eton, the chair of our markets committee, Laurent Smith from Decibel, the chair of our digital agenda committee, and Simon Anderson from the Traxis group, the chair of our active buildings and neighborhood committee. Thanks a lot, all of you, to join our discussion, and I would like to start with Dirk. And Dirk, indeed, the first recommendation is to indeed implement the electricity market design. Why is it the current electricity market design? Why is it so important for demand-side flexibility?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think it is important because there's demand-side flexibility is sitting as an asset which already is invested in. So it's something that you can use off the shelf, and it has not been yet tackled by the directive. I mean, like, it has been mentioned by European regulations here and there, but really the definition is missing. And I think, like, as the electricity market directive is like key for the electricity market itself, it makes very much sense, like, to mention it there and then nominate it there and then to implement it there and then to give like a clear path to investments as well that will be triggered by the EMD.
Thanks, Dirk. Stefan, instead, looking at the second recommendation, indeed, we are pushing for a target, and indeed, we provided a set of different alternatives. Why do we need that?
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and hello, everybody. The target to reduce peak demand is indeed a top priority for smartEn, and should be a top priority for the new electricity market design. Peak demand is responsible for a large part of the costs for our energy system. It leads to price spikes, which can be harmful to consumers. It puts electricity grids under stress and might require grid reinforcements. And given these effects of peak demand, it is nothing but logic to tackle the issue also on a regulatory level. I see two main arguments for a binding target. One is to give a strong political signal to investors and to the market that the solutions to reduce peak demand will be properly rewarded. We need these investments and we have to push them. And the second argument is to have a tool to measure improvements and to monitor progress. Or simply put, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and also later you can't improve it. Having said all this, obviously a target is not the only way to stimulate demand-side flexibility. It has to be complemented with appropriate measures. The target is only acting as a catalyst, triggering concrete measures and therefore accelerating demand-side flexibility.
Very good. And indeed, we are then gonna focus more also in the next months on this target formulation, based also on the experience in the US, because what we have now, this 5% demand reduction in peak times, is a scheme very similar to what is in place in Massachusetts. While instead a more the other type on peak demand reduction is something very much similar to what is in place in Pennsylvania. And these are all different types of alternatives to actually, as you said correctly, Stefan, to quantify measures and track progress on the activation of this flexibility potential. Laurent, we mentioned indeed that there are different metering devices to actually help activate the measure, quantify and activate the consumer participation. Why is that? Why do we need also to consider sub-metering systems along with smart meters?
Yes, thank you for the question. And I think what is very important is to think this new market design in view of what's happening at the edge of the system and the very large number of new devices which bring their own set of data, their own sub-metering information, being a new heat pump, a new bidirectional charger of electrical vehicles, as well as basically new devices like PV self-consumption with battery, and which actually offer a very accurate view, complementing what we can already get from smart meters. So it is really to make sure that we are able to make use of this very valuable data and progressively move away from baselines and statistical calculation, which everyone reckons are not suitable when we are at the level of low voltage and when we want to measure performance of devices which are not very well synchronize temporally. So basically, a residential battery has a very poor a regular performance, which you can baseline. And so we think this is crucial to move in that space. That means that this requires international data standards. We cannot think from that point of view in a single member states. All these suppliers of hardware are international worldwide players. So we need a pan-European standard. We need pan-European data exchange. And this data exchange needs to move to real-time, machine-readable, and be able to be used by AI technology and so on. So it is crucial to think that consumer interaction in view of all this new technology, which gets very quickly rolled out into our system.
Very good. And this will be indeed a major evolution also to overcome the opposition of some member states that do not have smart meters, like Germany, which were very timid on the 5 peak % emergency measures, but the flexibility from decentralized energy sources can be actually activated and measures anyway if you are relying on some metering devices. So it's not incompatible. Simon, we looked in 2022 together with DNV to a quantification of the multiple benefits of the activation of this system, distributed flexible resources, and we look at different cost savings that could be achieved following that activation. And one in particular figure was that we could avoid annually between 11 and 29 billions in distribution grid reinforcement if a flexible capacity from decentralized energy resources is activated. So how would our recommendation on district self-balancing contribute to those savings?
So let me start by explaining what we mean by district. So you may be familiar with the term last kilometer. We see district as being the electricity distribution system's last kilometer, or to put it another way, behind the substation. And by self-balancing, we mean the sharing of flexibility between buildings to manage peak loads and to optimize system efficiency. It's something akin to microgrids, but it's using the public infrastructure. As you say, DNV identified us quite a few benefits there. I also want to refer a couple of others there. So direct benefits could lead to a potential cost reduction for consumers of more than 71 billion euros at 64% per year on electricity consumption, and over 300 billion euros in indirect annual benefits to people, communities, and businesses. So we see district self-balancing services as the means of delivering these benefits to consumers. They are effectively a broad set of initiatives that optimizes last kilometer electricity distribution to the benefit of consumers, DSOs, and to TSOs.
Very good. Thanks a lot, Simon. And indeed, at the moment, we have already a number of provisions in European law targeting and stimulating the activation of demand-side resources for local benefits like energy communities or DSO, local flexibility markets, and collective self-consumption. But what we really need now is to have a cohesive local design for local markets, which is using maybe different rules compared to the wholesale principles to actually ensure coherence and enhance the multiplicity of these schemes and that have different shapes, covering also peer-to-peer energy sharing and so on. Then maybe, Stefan, moving on to another recommendation, we recommended indeed the introduction of scarcity pricing to reflect indeed the market value of scarcity which is so important, in particular in the current moment, and indeed enhance the value of flexibility in wholesale markets. At the moment, thinking indeed of another to electricity prices might be politically sensitive, but why do we need that in the long term?
First, I want to highlight that the existing wholesale market functions well overall. We're talking about an addition to the existing EMD. Nevertheless, the new EMD must better recognize the investment needs for flexibility at the demand side. And one option for that is as you said, scarcity pricing. We know this tool from GB and from the Irish electricity markets, where scarcity pricing is already implemented and functioning well. It's doing its job. We are aware of the fact, as you said, that the issue is politically sensitive, and in the current situation with the record high electricity prices, and therefore we are not asking for scarcity pricing to be implemented in the short term. It is not meant to be an emergency measure, but a measure to be considered in the long term, so that prices, also balancing prices, reflect scarcity properly. Scarcity pricing can also be implemented on a local level to activate distributed energy resources and decentralized storage, including V2G, for example. And with this, it can be a powerful measure to push demand-side flexibility in Europe.
Thanks, Stefan. I would now instead involve Simon again, notably to comment our last recommendation, because indeed, as we were saying, there is a lot of attention on generation-focused long-term initiatives to secure indeed the long-term security for investment, like CFD and PPA, but this might be detrimental to the demand side. How to ensure that is actually not happening?
So, as you say, these initiatives are focused primarily on supporting investment in supply-side initiatives. But investment in demand-side initiatives is also required. So this recommendation is about the adoption of the 24/7 Guarantee of Origin certificates. It's a simple first step to achieving this. This approach could also enhance the effectiveness of the EPBD and further the adoption of energy communities, in particular by harnessing smart data from smart meters, building management systems, etc., by implementing the use of actual building energy performance measures we recommended last year.
Thanks a lot, Simon. And Dirk, the flexibility register is and the development of flexibility registers to enable an acceleration of harmonized products, in particular for system services, could ease the activation of decentralized energy resources. How and on which conditions?
How to enable this, you mean?
Yeah, how that will be possible.
So I didn't get the question. Could you?
Well, if you can elaborate a bit more on the flexibility registers. So why do we need them?
Yeah, okay, no, sorry for that. I think that's very crucial because that's kind of like a new asset. Asset. I mean, that is something that is sitting there and ready to be used. And I think you need to map this to be in accordance as well with the network planning, and to really gets the most value out of the flexible assets. You know, when you know where they are sitting, you know how they can be used, and I think it's very crucial as well to have a map of these assets and have all the information ready to as well be able to use them upfront.
Thanks, Dirk.
Yeah.
I would move to Laurent instead and ask him to elaborate a bit more on our position on capacity mechanism, which, as I said, we need to have a rethinking and rebranding of the scope and the objective of capacity mechanism. How should they be improved in this sense to also support the demand side resources?
Yes, so first of all, our belief is that the energy market and the grid services should really be the core and the basis as a starting point, providing transparent and correct signals for flexibility. Having said that, we do recognize that in some markets, capacity remuneration mechanisms are required, in which case I think we really need to rethink the way some of these designs are made. In particular, basically when it comes to pan-European resource adequacy calculation, making sure that the benefit of demand-side flexibility is properly accounted for. I think we've seen in recent ACER reports on the current calculation that it is not properly calculated today. And I would also like to add that a demand-side flexibility resource is a very valuable resource for capacity, also because it avoids CO2 as opposed to certain larger generation assets, which are usually benefiting from this type of mechanism. So we really need to rethink that these mechanisms incentivize in a proper manner demand-side flexibility resources, do not derate artificially these resources. And if we feel that it is not, the current mechanisms are not appropriate, to add appropriate mechanism, being a critical peak price auctions for capacity dedicated to demand-side flexibility. And I would also open up one of the elements in the growing amount of renewable which we see in our pan-European system. We are going to see major curtailments, which are going to be negative peak. Why not also introducing capacity remuneration for basically avoiding curtailments during these periods and making sure grid capacity, battery distributed capacity can be used to avoid that kind of curtailment. So this is really important to rethink these mechanisms and make sure we properly integrate demand-side flexibility, because current mechanisms do not do this in a proper way, and it has to be looked at.
Thanks, Laurent, for your reply. I've seen that indeed we have received a few questions from the audience, and some of the replies have been already somehow clarified in my presentation and in yours. But maybe one on, and I think that Laurent, you can reply, is on the network code. Indeed, if smartEn is involved, and what's our indeed assessment of that recent developments. Yes, definitely smartEn is very much active, and we would like indeed to be involved in the drafting committee. But Laurent, maybe you have some comments on the ACER framework guidelines.
Yeah, a very interesting question. So we are looking at it in detail, particularly when it comes to data exchange and topics like flexibility registered and so on. We are really looking at the opening up on the sub-metering data very positively on one side. On the other side, we are, I would say, quite frustrated about the lack of ambition when it comes to pan-European data and harmonization. And I think we really need to continue our work in making sure this code does not further split markets across Europe, but there is really a harmonization when it comes to integration of DER. I remind that DER being a heat pump, a car, and EVs are the same wherever the country we are. So we need consistent data exchange, consistent way of interacting with markets wherever they are across Europe. So that element, I think, is a bit lost in the current new framework. But we hope we'll be able to be actively contributing to the drafting moving forward.
Thanks. There are pretty a number of questions on our position on district self-balancing or district or local self-optimization. Just to clarify one point, we with that recommendation, we don't necessarily require an evolution towards local marginal pricing. This is actually our recommendation is an alternative to that, because yeah, we assessed that option, but politically might be very difficult to have an harmonized evolutions towards that, and any kind of local self-optimization can take place without that evolution. Very happy to keep working with different organizations also to stimulate and further elaborate on that kind of concept, which is going to be extremely important also to offset the exposition of consumers to very high wholesale and volatile prices. So a local self-optimization is extremely important already now as an initiative. Then there are a few questions also on the link with digitalization and the digitalization of energy action plan. Definitely, yes, we see a coherence between our recommendation on the electricity market design and the implementation of that action plan, but the two should go in parallel. And the remarks that we were making before on also data from sub-metering system should be also coherent and further developed on any kind of implementing act on interoperability for demand-side resources and the other action plans related to this digitalization action plan. Are there any remarks from the panelists while I'm looking at the other questions that we might that we are receiving now?
Yeah, Michael, there will be like one remark from my side, and I think like you mentioned this in the beginning about the German case that we do see now. That is actually that you could have like national regulations which are right on the contrary to the European regulations. So and that is something that actually I think like we are missing somehow in the whole discussion. That even like with the existing electricity market directive not have been like get into most of the national regulations. Now we're taking like a new push, and then we really need to ensure, I think, that this is going to be live into international regulations.
Important point. Simon.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a quick word about why district self-balancing is so important. The three key government decarbonisation strategies, electrification of transport, electrification of heating, and the maximisation of rooftop solar, are all unique in that they depend on high consumer adoption rates. This depends primarily on consumers being able to afford to buy and install this equipment. And this depends on the effective monetization of consumer flexibility, delivering the benefits that the DNV study identified. In turn, this depends on developing district energy flexibility markets, and this would provide a reliable revenue source to support investment, and thus enable governments to achieve the delivery of these three key strategies, and at minimal cost and risk. So it is a circular argument here, but it's a really important circular argument because it is about consumers.
Very important point, Simon. And actually, on the 19th of April, we are going to organize here in Brussels our Smart Energy Summit, which is specifically going to be focused on the maximization of local optimization. And so, there is going to be another opportunity to further discuss with the broad stakeholders community. I received a question on our definition of demand-side flexibility. Yes, definitely. In our definition, which you can already find also in other papers already published in the past by smartEn, we are linking that to decentralized energy resources, because demand management, distributed energy storage facilities, including from electric vehicles and distributed renewable generation are the types of decentralized energy resources that will enable consumers to unleash their demand side flexibility. So yes, definitely there is an extremely important link between the two. I would then now involve the audience in a poll, in a survey using Slido. And indeed, you will have now the opportunity to see the number to actually contribute to that. And we will actually ask you to express your preference among our set of recommendations. So a pretty simple pool. Well, this is the reply, but I think that we should first show the Slido alternatives for this pool. Otherwise, indeed, that you can go on slido.com and introduce indeed your the number 1893300. I'm also doing that together with you, and here you see indeed the list of the options, and we are asking indeed among the 7 recommendations identified by smartEn, which is the most relevant one for you. The first one is don't waste time in revising the existing EMD, fully implement it now, introduce national targets to activate demand-side flexibility, strengthen consumer empowerment, maximize district self-balancing, unlock the value of demand-side flexibility resources in electricity markets, support investments with capacity remuneration arrangements, and the last, combine renewable support schemes with distributed flexibility. Please submit your replies. I see that there is
Michael, is there any way like to show like the whole 7?
Yeah, indeed. It would be very good if we can see all the replies, Sebastian, and not just limiting that to the first 4 replies. That would be very good. But indeed, we see that a good interest there is on the our recommendation at for wholesale and ancillary services market. The strengthening of the consumer empowerment, and also on the maximization of district self-balancing. So that's pretty clear that there is a clear interest from the 36 participants that have replied already to this poll to go in that sense. Very well. Thanks a lot for this for your participation to this webinar. That was indeed the first occasion to present publicly to different stakeholders our recommendation on the electricity market design. This is going to be indeed the first initiative. Then we will have further others to also deep dive into some elements. And we are very much happy to cooperate with any kind of stakeholders to further elaborate and also to keep the discussion with the Commission and also the other co-legislators to guide us towards a smooth finalization of this very important package. As I said, the position paper is already available online. The slides will be shared with the audience, and the recording of this video will be available. This webinar will be available on our website and on our social media channels. Thanks a lot, everyone, and thanks a lot also to Sabine and to the panelists, and have a good continuation of the day. Bye-bye.